Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you guys are, because I can see that we have people from all across Canada. It is really my pleasure to welcome you guys in this virtual conference of ours. My name is Dr. Emmanuel Fontaine, Pro Technical Services at Veterinarian at Royal Canin Canada, and my area of expertise is canine and feline reproduction. In North America, you guys call us veterinarians like me, terrier-genologists. So it's, again, a pleasure to have you guys here in this virtual conference room. I'm talking to you now from Calgary, where I'm doing some visits in the field. But thanks to the technology of the webinar, we can still reach out to you guys all across the country, and we can have a great discussion on a topic that is super interesting in my opinion, which is canine neonatology. And you see, today, during this presentation, we are going to really deep dive on this very specific part of canine reproduction. And there's an important point I'd like to make right here. You see, we often use puppy, this term right here. We often use it as a generic term, while in fact, there are really two different periods, two distinct periods we need to differentiate during what we could call puppyhood. You see, we have the neonatal period that goes from birth to roughly start of nutritional weaning, 3-4 weeks of age. And then we have the pediatric period that goes from weaning until the puppy reaches its adult size. Two different periods. Clearly, two different types of individuals. And obviously, very different kind of challenges we see in veterinary clinics. So today, we will focus only on the neonatology part. Again, this part that goes from birth to roughly 3-4 weeks of age. And I can tell you something, guys. This is a part that is very, very dear to my heart. And in fact, it started 15 years ago. At that time, I was a third-year veterinary student. I'll skip you the details, but to make it super short, you see, I had a Labrador bitch. She was accidentally bred. She got pregnant. And I ended up with 9 puppies that she delivered on a sunny Sunday morning of April in the trunk of my car while I was going to visit my girlfriend. And you see, at that time, I found that was quite epic. And as I said, I was a third-year vet student. My experience in this field was, we can say, pretty limited. And I ended up being lucky, you know, because on this one, there was no problem during parturition. The mother seemed to have good maternal instincts. The puppy looked okay to me. I mean, they really looked okay. They were doing what I was expecting them to do. Crawling, crying, nursing. You know, I thought there was really nothing to worry about here. And several times a day, I would check on the mother and the puppies. I would go and do a quick visual check just to make sure everything was fine. And again, everything always seemed perfectly fine to me. 2 days after the puppies were born, I went to do my morning visual check. And at that moment, I find out that, in fact, the night before, 4 of those puppies had passed away. It really came as a shock, you know. I wasn't expecting that. I never even thought that this could happen, you know. To me, those puppies looked healthy. Clearly, I had missed something. And at that time, it was a totally devastating experience. I felt like I wasn't ready to properly handle newborn puppies. But you know what? When I graduated a few years later, I really don't think I was better prepared either. I got involved in canine repro, and after that, I did a residency, a PhD in this discipline. And one thing I quickly realized, canine neonatology was, and somehow still is, a gray area of veterinary medicine, an area where there are still lots of unanswered questions. And for a long time, there hasn't been much news in this field until 2016. So if you guys wonder what a bunch of repro vets having scientific fun look like, take a look at this picture. It was taken in June 2016. I think I'm here, right here. Obviously not looking at the camera, but anyway, this picture was taken during a conference that is called the 2016 ISCFR. And ISCFR stands for International Symposium on Canine and Feline Reproduction. This conference is a little bit like the Olympics in the field of canine repro. It only happens every 4 years, and it is the place to be to meet your colleagues from all over the planet and discuss how we approach the challenges of canine repro we all face. And in 2016, there was a very, very big focus on neonatology, driven by a research group called Neocare. They are a French research group, and no wonder we get along that well. But they are based out of the vet school of Toulouse, in south of France. And in my opinion, you see, their work really gives us a bright new look on how to approach canine neonatology. So during this event in Paris, I listened to their presentation. I read their posters. I had what I consider meaningful discussions with them on this topic of canine neonatology. And from what they presented, there were some very practical tips that would have been very helpful to me back in the days when I was having my first litter of puppies. I believe those tips will be very helpful to you guys also in the field and in your clinics. They started their work because they wanted to answer this simple question: how can we better identify puppies that are at risk for neonatal mortality? Remember what I told you at the beginning of my story. The death of those puppies really came as a surprise to me. I wasn't really good at detecting early signs of illness. But to be fair, that's not always easy, especially in newborns. It was not easy for the newbie I was at the time. But I can tell you something. It isn't easy for many of us since, again, very often, nearly every week, I receive email, Facebook messages from veterinarians, breeders, who are facing the same type of challenges. They write to me, "Hey, doc, I lost this litter of puppies, and I didn't see it coming." For sure, some cases are obvious, guys. You just take a look, and you see that something isn't right. You see those puppies having difficulties to breathe. You see some puppies with seizures. You can see that there's something wrong. But what about all those cases that are kind of in between? Neocare, during this presentation, during this Congress, shared their full protocol. And I'm going basically to walk you through it today. What I love about it is that it enables you to detect those at-risk puppies very early, before they even start showing clinical signs. And in neonatology, I think we can agree on that. The sooner, the better. And the good news is, it starts right after birth. And there's a tool for that I believe you guys all need to know about. I have a question for you guys, and this is when we have the opportunity to be interactive online. You see this picture of this woman right here. Can you tell me on the chat, who do you think she is? Don't be shy. Remember, I'm the one not speaking real English here. So tell me on the chat, who do you think she is? And tell me if you have no idea. I can tell you one thing. She's super famous. Like some of you are just sending me question marks. Oh, somebody said she's Madame Fontaine, my wife. No, not really. You know, usually when I show this picture, some people are telling me, hey, she looks like the Queen of England. But I can tell you, we made a comparison, and definitely she's not the Queen of England. This lady is very, very famous, as I said. And I'm going to show you her name, and I'm sure for many of you, it's going to ring a bell. Her name is Virginia Apgar. She's a very famous human anesthesiologist. And her legacy, I'm sure you heard about it if you had kids, is what we call the Apgar scores. Those scores that are used in nearly every maternity, those scores that are considered to be the gold standard in human medicine to assess the health of newborn human babies. The Apgar score is really a legacy. And I know you guys love acronyms. I mean, I keep learning new ones on a daily basis for 7 years now. But I think this is a pretty clever one. They use the name of Virginia Apgar, her last name, Apgar, to describe those 5 parameters that she recommended to check on human newborn babies right after they were born. Appearance, color of the mucosa, color of the gums, pulse, heartbeat, grimace, what we call reflex irritability. Basically, you pinch the newborn and you see if it reacts or not. activity, how human newborns will react if you try to manipulate their legs and if they have some reflexes. And respiration, respiratory rate. So you see here, Apgar, a set of 5 criteria that is used in human health to quickly assess the health of human newborn babies right after birth. And somebody just moved my slide without asking me the permission, but that's not a problem. As you can see, the Apgar scores, they are the standard in human neonatology, and they've been adapted in veterinary medicine. They were adapted to assess the health of newborn foals, newborn calves, and also, as you can see here, newborn puppies. This study here was published in 2009 by a team by a research group at the University of Milan in Italy. And first thing I want to tell you guys, each time I mention those Apgar scores in vet clinics, there's always somebody in the room who will tell me, okay, it exists, great, but why should we use that? What's the point? I think I already gave you part of the answer. But the reason for that, in my opinion, is the exact same one. Why Virginia Apgar developed this scoring system for human babies. You see, she observed that some babies were frequently placed out of sight and basically left to die because it has not been clearly identified that they were struggling. Nobody has identified that there was a problem. She wished she could quickly identify those newborns that needed additional help. And that's what led her to develop this system. And I think for the exact same reason, it will justify the systematic use of this scoring system in newborn puppies. I gave you my example. Giving a look at something is great, but with the Apgar scores, I mean, you will have an opportunity to quantify things. And being able to quantify things, that will always be a better and more accurate evaluation, in my opinion. First question for you guys. Tell me, according to you, what do you think? For how long after those puppies are born can we rely on the Apgar score? For how long after those puppies are born can we still use Apgar scores? Only right after birth? 5 minutes after birth? First hour after birth? First 8 hours after birth? For how long can you use those Apgar scores? Right after the birth of those puppies. Oh, this is my favorite moment when I can see those charts moving in all directions. I wish I had that tool when I was working at the vet school. So if I'm asking you this question, guys, it's because maybe you know in human medicine, they perform the Apgar scores right after birth, and then they do it again 5 minutes after birth. They see if there's an evolution. In the 2009 study I just showed you, the Italian team, they were doing the scoring in the 5 minutes after the puppies were born. The NeoCare group showed us that, in fact, in canines, the score retains a good diagnostic value for puppies if you use it during the first 8 hours after birth. And that's what you guys just answered here. So I'm glad you guys, 63% of you got this correct. And my point here is, sometimes we often believe that those Apgar scores, we can only use them right after the C-section or right after those puppies are born. But if a bitch starts to give birth and you were not around or there was nobody around to do the scoring, this remains a good diagnostic, a good tool to use during the first 8 hours. Very important point to keep in mind, in my opinion. So as I said, Apgar scoring, it's a scoring system. So you will score 5 different parameters, and for each parameter, basically, you will put a score, 0, 1, and 2, depending on what you observe. And it will look like that. Appearance, as I said, the color of the mucous membrane, you see cyanotic, 0, pale, 1, pink, 2. Heart rate. Irritability reflex, basically, you will pinch the paw of the puppy, and you will see how it will react. Mobility, you will just look in the nest to see if they are mobile or not, if they are crawling around. And respiration, the respiratory rate of those newborns. So you see, this is the Apgar score, and these are the 5 parameters you will score and how you will score them in order to get your Apgar scoring system, because basically then you just make an addition. You put the score, you addition all the different score for each parameters, and you will get a result. And so as you can see, we have 5 parameters. Maximal mark is 2, so the maximum you can get for a puppy is 10. The healthy puppy will be at 10. But my question is to you, which puppies will be problematic? Those puppies which have an Apgar score between 0 and 4? Those puppies with an Apgar score between 4 and 7? Those puppies with an Apgar score between 7 and 10? Or any time a puppy has an Apgar score below 10? One key figure, I'm going to keep that. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. So most of you tell me anytime a puppy has an Apgar score below 10. Well, in fact, the proper answer is here. There is a problem anytime we are dealing with a puppy with an Apgar score below 7. And the key figure is, when you have an Apgar score below 7, the risk of neonatal mortality is increased 22 times. And again, some people often tell me, hey, come on, doc, I don't have time to do that. You know, to do this full exam, it will take you less than a minute. In less than a minute, you'll be able to quickly evaluate those different parameters. In less than a minute, you will have a quantitative assessment of a newborn puppy's health. In less than a minute, based on this assessment, you will have a better idea of what to do for this specific puppy. So I truly believe this will be a great investment of your time, and I know in many vet schools now, anytime we do a C-section, the first thing we do on those newborns after we resuscitate them is to do an Apgar scoring system. So coming back to the interpretation of the result, again, something that is pretty obvious here. You see those puppies which have an Apgar score between 0 and 4. Those are the ones that are really struggling. For those ones, to be honest with you guys, you don't need really to use those Apgar scores, because you will see that they are struggling to breathe. You will see that they are lethargic. You will see that there's something wrong. Visually, you will see there's a problem. Your tricky puppies, the problematic ones, in my opinion, are those ones between 4 and 7. Because in those ones, you see, the clinical signs will be very subtle. They will be very, very easy to miss. And those are the ones you want to detect, thanks to those Apgar scores. Because when you detect them, again, you will know what to do. You know that those puppies will require some extra care. So, and what to do on those puppies? I think it really depends on when you perform the scoring system, you know. If you do it right after birth and you identify a puppy below 7, you need to go back immediately to the resuscitation techniques. Clear the airway with a suction device, rub the newborn's rib cage to stimulate respiration. One thing I want you guys to remember, we do not recommend anymore to swing puppies after they're born, because we know there can be potential neurological consequences. We do have some papers that are describing something we call the shaken puppy syndrome. So today we do not swing puppies anymore. This is not a recommendation we give anymore, but just rubbing the thoracic cage, clearing the airways with a suction device will do the trick here. So you see those puppies which have a severe distress, those Apgar score between 0 and 4, right after birth, they should receive immediate medical assistance, oxygenotherapy, epinephrine injection to boost the heart rate. That's what those will require. And those, I'm not going to lie, are very, very, the prognosis is usually very, very poor. The 2009 study, however, showed that in puppies with moderate Apgar score, again, those between 4 and 7, if you go back to the resuscitation techniques, nearly 90% of them will have an improved Apgar score 5 minutes after, and again, an improved survival rate. If you do the scoring after parturition has happened, and I mean during this 8-hour time frame that we mentioned, and you identify a puppy still with a moderate Apgar score, this one, as I said before, will require extra care. And extra care is an interesting word. So don't you guys worry. We are going to clearly define what this means for you guys in the rest of the presentation. But remember that depending on when you find those puppies, you will act differently, basically. Again, I believe Apgar scoring system is a very simple, quick, and efficient tool that can be used to quickly identify puppies at risk and quickly take measures to optimize the newborn's health and optimize their chances of survival. For sure, as I said, those puppies that are really struggling, we will easily identify them. But remember, and I really want to emphasize that, we are looking for those tricky ones, those between 4 and 7. And you might easily miss them unless, again, you use this very simple scoring system. So don't you guys freak out. The screen is black, and that's totally normal. You didn't lose your connection. I'm just using that to remind you one thing. You see, in my lectures on neonatology, I always tell people that if there is one important tool they need in neonatology to better assess newborn puppies, if they only need one single tool, well, it would be that one. It would be a scale. This is, in my opinion, the best tool we have to monitor a newborn's health. And when the puppy is born, when the puppy has been properly resuscitated, whether by you or by the mom, when you did an Apgar score, because now you know about them, then you should immediately weigh them, because you want to detect as early as possible those puppies with a low birth weight. And I'm saying that because the NeoCare studies indeed showed that 81.1%, 81.1, this number is huge, 81.1% of the newborn puppies that are born with a low birth weight will die during the first 48 hours after birth. Neonatal mortality risk is increased 13 times in a low birth weight puppy. It's pretty scary, right? This tells us a very simple thing. When you detect one of those, again, extra care, we are back on it, should be immediately initiated. Well, that being said, when I say that during presentation, there's always somebody again in the room who will think, oh, great, thanks for stating the obvious. I just added some numbers to, well, something we already knew. The puppy is smaller, it will be weaker, it will have more difficulty to access the mammary gland. I would argue to that it is great to have numbers, because now it gives us a better idea of how critical birth at weight is. If puppies are way smaller, oh, for sure, there might be more at risk. But I have a tricky question for you guys here, and you can try to answer on the chat. Tell me, guys, what does low birth weight puppy mean to you? For sure, you will come up typically with different factors. Some people will tell me, oh, but it depends. It depends on this and that. So the real question I have for you, what are the factors, according to you, that will influence the weight of a puppy at birth? Tell me on the chat. What are the factors you think will influence the weight of a newborn puppy? So I'm looking at the answers coming up on the chat. Fantastic. So just to give you a quick summary of what you guys are telling me on the chat. So some people are telling me the way the bitch was fed during gestation, that's critical and that makes a big difference. If the bitch isn't properly fed during gestation, and remember, we have very specific protocols on how to feed the bitch during gestation, that will clearly impact the neonatal, the birth weight of those newborn puppies. The breed is also a factor that will play a big role, because obviously a newborn Chihuahua will not weigh the same thing like a newborn Great Dane. The litter size, some of you mentioned that, will definitely play a role. And that's a great tool to keep in mind, great indication to keep in mind, because you'll see we can use that to our advantage. So all those different factors can potentially influence the litter size, the weight of a puppy right after birth. And if we look in the veterinary textbooks, this is what you will find. It might not be perfect, because you see, for the record, those numbers that I find, that I found in the veterinary textbooks, they vary between chapters within the same book. But it still gives us some baseline that can help us better identify those newborns at risk. And this table now is from the NeoCare study. Again, it gives us a good start. those are good data to have in mind because they were again able to define, based on the adult body weight of the mother, a threshold below which those puppies should be considered more at risk. It's a good start. And be aware that NeoCare is still collecting data to be able to be more accurate and maybe in the future to be able to give you those data per breed and eventually even per line, because we know that from one continent to the other, a low birth weight German Shepherd might not be the same, for instance, because the lines are different. So we have those data that we can use. But there's, some of you mentioned the fact that the litter size can influence the weight of a puppy at birth, which is obvious. I mean, the bigger the litter, the smaller the puppies, because you have more uterine competition and less space for the placenta to adhere to the uterus and to receive the nutrition from the placenta. And what NeoCare identified is that, in fact, low birth weight in puppies was 4 times more likely in large litters. So here, what we need to know is, what's a large litter? So the good thing is that this is something they define in their studies. And you see in this graph here, basically their definition of a large litter in canines. So what does this mean to you in practice? You see, we often recommend when we deal with a pregnant bitch to do an X-ray around 50 days of gestation to be able to get a count, to know exactly how many puppies are expected. I find this to be a great tool to better manage parturition. Now I will also find this a great tool to anticipate, because again, you know that if you have a large litter based on the numbers we have here on this slide, well, you know that you might have up to 40% of the puppies from this litter which will be born with a low birth weight. And my favorite say is, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. When you know that this is going to happen, when you can anticipate, you know that your client, yourself, you need to have everything on hand when the mother will give birth, because some of those puppies, again, will immediately require some extra care. And now we have a better idea on how to identify that. So you see, in combining the Apgar score and the scale, you will be able to quickly identify at-risk puppies during the first 8 hours after birth. Once again, simple tools that can help you win big here. But the neonatal period runs until 3 weeks of age. So let's move to our second checkpoint, which is 24 hours after birth. Maybe you guys have already heard about something I call the 3H syndrome, which is, in my opinion, something very important and something, a very common cause of neonatal mortality. 3H stands for the 3 terms you can see on the slide right now: hypothermia, dehydration, hypoglycemia. 3 conditions newborn puppies are definitely highly predisposed to develop. So let's start with hypothermia. Newborn puppies are highly predisposed to develop this condition because, well, they are not able to thermoregulate. They cannot shiver like an adult to increase their body temperature. They have low amount of body fat. They cannot keep their internal temperature as adults would. When they're cold, they will get colder. They will only acquire this ability when they reach 3 weeks after they're born. And question for you guys: what is the normal body temperature of a newborn puppy right after birth? Try to give it a guess. 39, 40 degrees Celsius, 37, 38 degrees Celsius, 35, 36 degrees Celsius, 34, 35 degrees Celsius. What do you think is the normal body temperature of a newborn puppy right after birth? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So the vast majority of you answered that it will be between 37 and 38 degrees Celsius. It's going to be interesting because you see, an adult, I'm sure we can all agree on that, an adult dog will typically be at 38, 39 degrees Celsius. However, a newborn puppy right after birth will be at 34, 35 degrees Celsius in body temperature. And that right here let me grab the thing here. This right here is the normal body temperature of a newborn puppy right after birth. I'm telling you that because this is a very common mistake. I remember many years ago I was doing an emergency consultation. I was a newly graduated vet, and I had this young Rottweiler puppy that somebody brought to me. First thing I did, I took its temperature. It was at 35 degrees Celsius, and I freaked out. I really freaked out because I thought it was hypothermic and I needed to warm it up, while in fact it was a 3-day-old puppy. It was totally normal. The thing is, that's when we deal with a newborn puppy, I always recommend when they get to the clinic, when we start working on them, the first thing I always recommend to do is to check their body temperature. One thing you need to keep in mind, when the body temperature of a newborn puppy drops below 34 degrees Celsius, those puppies are no more able to digest. There is no more digestive transit. So if you try to supplement a puppy that has a low body temperature, and when you think of it, many people, that's what they want to do first. A newborn puppy is not doing well, we want to bottle feed it. In fact, if you bottle feed this puppy with a low body temperature, well, basically, there's no digestive transit. It will accumulate in the stomach, and this will bloat, and it can potentially lead to false aspiration. So altogether, this is the very first parameter we want to check. And as you can see, the temperature is usually way below what we think in a newborn puppy. But there is more to add to this temperature story. You see, the puppy's body temperature will generally increase if the newborn is in the right environment. So in the right environment, remember, we mentioned a couple of times this extra care we need to provide to those at-risk puppies. The right environment. That's one thing you will need to make sure of then. You see, 24 hours after those puppies are born, their body temperature should be between 36.5 degrees Celsius. And it has increased. It is not because the puppies were able to increase their body temperature by themselves, but it's mainly by convection because they were in contact with their mother, because they were in contact with their litter mates. And you should see this increase. If at 24 hours after birth, the body temperature is below 35 degrees Celsius, well, again, the digestive process might be impacted. And the NeoCare studies tell us that neonatal mortality rate is increased 4 times in this situation. So that's why they recommend this very simple check, 24 hours after birth. Check the puppy's temperature. If it's below 35 degrees Celsius, there's definitely a problem, and you definitely need to do something to warm it up. So quick tips my friends at NeoCare gave me here, so that I think would be interesting to share with you guys. They recommend to take the temperature. They recommend to use a pediatric thermometer to take rectal temperature, and this is one you can buy for less than $10 on Amazon. This is a pediatric thermometer with a flexible tip, and with the temperature range starting at 32 degrees Celsius. And great too. I know that sometimes some people tell me, oh, but it must be very difficult to take temperature in a newborn puppy. We take rectal temperature in newborn kittens, in Singapores, which are very small newborn kittens. And as long as you do it gently, it is not a problem at all in my experience. But you know, more and more people tell me, oh, they really don't want to use rectal thermometers. They want to use this instead, infrared temperature, infrared thermometers. And those are interesting options to consider. However, if you decide to go down that route, if you decide to use an infrared thermometer, if you use this, well, guys, you'll need this, a table that will help you define the corresponding rectal temperature. Because let me give you an example. You use your infrared thermometer and you find a temperature of 35 degrees Celsius. You will say, okay, we're good based on what you just said. But look, corresponding rectal temperature is 31 degrees Celsius. All the temperatures I gave you before are rectal temperatures. So we can use an infrared thermometer, but we just need to have this corresponding table so that we are sure we are interpreting the result properly. So tiny tip, tiny practical tip that, again, can help you win big here. And as I said, what do we do if we are presented a puppy suffering from hypothermia? Well, obviously, you will need to warm it up first before trying anything, especially bottle feeding or tube feeding, because remember, those puppies cannot digest. So when it comes to warming up puppies, there is nothing really new under the sun here, guys. We can use heat lamps. That's still one of my big favorites. Heating pads, warm bottles. You can use whatever technique you want as long as puppies have the ability to move away from the heat source if they feel like it. And there's another technique I learned in North America. I know that breeders and vet techs use them a lot. For lack of a better word, I call it the cleavage technique because basically that's what they're doing. They're putting the puppies inside their bra. And you know what? I've never learned this about this technique at the vet school, but well, it does the trick. It seems to be effective. I mean, human body temperature will definitely do the trick here. My point is, whichever technique you use, remember one thing. Warming up has to be progressive. You don't want to kind of microwave them. You don't want to go too fast here. When you start doing that, wait 1 hour, 1 hour and 30 minutes before trying anything, especially before bottle feeding them. Do not try to rush things here. You wait, you warm them up 1 hour, 1 hour and 30 minutes, and then you consider bottle feeding. During this conference in 2016, one of the most interesting things I found in the Neocare's presentation was around hypoglycemia. And you see, until now, I always considered hypoglycemia in newborn puppies to be more of a clinical diagnosis. I mean, we will think of this problem when we observe weakness, lethargy, seizures. But something interesting was presented in this conference. And I have a question for you guys first. According to the veterinary textbooks, when do we consider hypoglycemia in newborn puppies? When the blood glucose level is below 1 gram per liter, when the blood glucose level is below 0.9 gram per liter, or when it's below 0.5 or 0.4. When do we consider hypoglycemia in newborn puppies, according to the veterinary textbooks? Tell me what you guys think. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and we have huge variations in terms of answers. And you see, most of you answered when the blood glucose level is found to be below 0.9 gram per liter. When I was doing my residency, I had to spend a lot of time reading textbooks. And the kind of interesting thing is that if you read the textbooks of veterinary medicine, you will see that, in fact, hypoglycemia in newborn puppy is defined when the blood glucose level drops below 0.3, 0.4 gram per liter. 0.3, 0.4. And when I was at this conference, I went to see one of the posters of the Neocare group, and this is what was mentioned. That the risk of neonatal mortality was increased 4 times if the puppy's blood glucose concentration was found below 0.9 gram per liter 24 hours after birth. So you see, as I said, I spent a lot of time reading textbooks, and that finding, this number right here, really blew me away because it was totally different from what the textbooks are describing. It was really a big gap. I mean, between 0.3, 0.4, and 0.9, I think we can agree there's a big gap here. What the Neocare study showed us is that the problem arrived earlier than what we thought. So in their studies, those measures were performed directly at the kennel, right next to the puppies. And some of them were even done by the breeders who were participating in those studies. So you see, I couldn't help asking, how? Did they only work with breeders with medical skills that know how to draw blood, and even drawing blood in a newborn, especially if this newborn is not doing well? I think many of you can agree that can be quite a challenge. When I asked them that, they laughed. And that was surprising to me because, I mean, we were all speaking French, so we should perfectly understand each other. But they laughed. They told me, no, absolutely not. they said that they were working with anybody who wanted to take part in their studies. So, how did you do that? And they told me, well, instead of drawing blood with a needle and a syringe, they use this. That's what they use. A portable glucometer from human medicine designed for diabetic people. And instead of pricking their finger to collect a blood sample, well, as you can see on the picture here, they pricked the puppies here. Simple, easy, efficient, one drop of blood, and by doing that, it helps detect puppies at risk as soon as 24 hours after they're born. You see, when I heard that, I definitely foresee, after hearing that, I definitely foresee that this kind of tool, this glucometer, will become an integral part of the neonatology toolkit. It will nicely complement the scale and the thermometer, and it will allow us to be more accurate at detecting at-risk newborn puppies and immediately take preventive measures to optimize their chances of survival. Because what to do then if we identify an at-risk puppy here? Those, again, are puppies that require extra care. And we already discussed a bit about the importance of the environmental measures. I mean, making sure that they are that in their immediate environment, you have the right temperature. When those environmental measures are under control, the next thing to consider then is to make sure that those newborn puppies get proper nutrition. Because, again, that's what will bring water and energy. Remember, they are highly predisposed to dehydration as well, and that will help prevent hypoglycemia and dehydration. Puppies that are in evident bad shape, of course, they will require veterinary assistance. Those are the puppies who will try to put an IV or an intraosseous catheter so that we can provide them with fluidotherapy. But if you detect them early enough, thanks to those simple tests as I mentioned, well, nutritional supplementation will be something important to consider, something critical. And here, a dedicated canine milk replacer will do the trick and help prevent these developing conditions. And it will prevent them from becoming a bigger problem. And you see, we can detect that way before the problem arises, in fact. The problem becomes more important. So, NeoCare checkpoints, 24 hours after those puppies are born, we check the temperature and we check their blood glucose levels. And now let's move to their last checkpoint, 48 hours after those puppies are born. So let's take a look at this graph. You see here, this is a snapshot of a growth curve of 3 different puppies during the first 48 hours after they're born. I let you guys take a look. You see we have puppy A, puppy B, puppy C. So now that you had the opportunity to take a look at this slide and to take a look at the curves, the charts, I have a question for you guys. So you see puppy A, B, C? Which puppy here is at risk? None of them? A, B, C, all of them? Tell me, which of these puppies, which puppy here is at risk? Five, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so the winning puppy, the puppy which seems to be the more at risk for you guys here is puppy C. But what about that? The answer here is that, in fact, all 3 of them have a neonatal mortality risk that is increased 8 times. Thanks to the NeoCare study, we know that all of them are at higher risk. You see, I'm sure you've all heard that. Puppies can lose up to 10% of their birth weight during the first day after they're born, but then they should gain weight again. This is something written in many veterinary textbooks. I myself said that in many presentations over the years. The NeoCare study demonstrated that, in fact, this is not true. Anytime puppies lose weight, there is a risk. So comes back to why I was telling you a scale is something so important to have. This is a very simple tool that can help you win big. Monitoring the weight gain of those newborn puppies. Those newborn puppies should gain weight on a daily basis. if you observe a plateau, if you observe a weight loss, the risk of neonatal mortality is increased. And those puppies, as soon as you observe this weight loss or this plateau, will require this extra care we've been discussing. NeoCare also introduced a new indicator that is definitely worth looking into, in my opinion. This is something they call early growth rate. I made up my own acronym here, EGR. EGR for, oops, where is my highlighter? Early growth rate. 7 years in Canada, and now I can make my own acronyms. But you see, joke about, this is what the equation looks like, this here. Weight at day 2 minus weight at birth divided by weight at birth. It will give you a percentage. It will be this early growth rate. And this percentage, when it's below minus 4%, the risk of neonatal mortality is increased 8 times. The NeoCare study showed us that the optimal cutoff value of growth during these first 48 hours of life to assess predictive likelihood of mortality was this minus 4%. And think about it. It means that if a puppy born at 100 grams loses 4 grams during the first 2 days, it is at risk. If this happens, the risk that this puppy dies during the neonatal period is again increased 8 times. And if we go back to the curves, you see puppy A, minus 4%. Puppy B, minus 4%. And look at puppy C, minus 8.4%. While the curve is almost flat. Tells you one thing, one simple thing. In newborn puppies, every gram counts. This reemphasizes something we always tell, and I already mentioned before. If there is one thing you definitely need to monitor your puppy's health, it's a scale. No single doubt about that. That's the best tool to assess their health during the neonatal period. So you see the NeoCare, that's how NeoCare answered the first question they had. How can we better identify newborn puppies that are at risk? A set of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 parameters that you can check between birth and 8 hours, at 24 hours, at 48 hours, to identify this population of at-risk puppies. But the great thing is, they didn't stop here. They also came up with new strategies in this field to help those newborn puppies that were identified at risk. And for that, they focus on the canine colostrum. Remember, colostrum, first milk of the mother, that will provide the newborn puppies with immunity and something we tend to forget, energy. Remember that colostrum is an immunity booster and at the same time an energy booster. By drinking the colostrum, those newborn puppies will receive this energy boost they need so much during right after they're born, and they will receive this immunity boost against the disease the mother is vaccinated for and against the disease the mother encountered during her lifetime. And one thing I can tell you guys, colostrum, immunity transfer via colostrum is all about timing. For how long after birth can puppies absorb the colostrum? What do you guys think? For how long after birth can puppies absorb the colostrum? During the first 4 hours after they're born? During the first 12 to 16 hours? During the first 24 hours? Or during the first 72 hours? For how long after birth can puppies absorb the colostrum? So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So the majority of you goes for the first 24 hours. So the NeoCare studies, in fact, started with one study on colostral transfer in canines. And it's kind of interesting because at that time, when they started this study, I was still at the vet school, and I even participated somehow to this study. I did some of the blood samples we were doing in this study. But today we know that, in fact, colostrum in puppies is only absorbed during the first 12 to 16 hours after they are born. And in fact, it starts to dramatically decrease as soon as 4 hours after birth. You have a peak of colostrum absorption 4 hours after birth in newborn puppies. And after 16 hours, the immunoglobulins are no more able to go through the intestinal barrier. And they will therefore not be able to provide with this systemic immunity, with this immune protection those puppies require. So you understand it's kind of a race, right? And you want to make sure that your puppies will drink the colostrum as soon as possible after they're born. And I have another question. So I think we can agree this is a bitch, and you can see anatomy reminder from your anatomy lectures. A bitch has 5 pairs of mammary glands, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And question for you, you see 5 pairs of mammary glands. When you look at this picture here, 1 is the abdominal mammary gland, 5 is the thoracic pair of mammary glands. Which pair of mammary glands produce the best quality colostrum? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What do you think? Which pair of mammary glands will produce the best quality colostrum? So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Oh, interesting. So what I get from that is that nobody's really sure. And let me show you again this picture here. So you see, back in the days when I was doing consultation at the vet school, I always assumed that, well, you know, those mammary glands here, the abdominal ones, 1 and 2, will provide the best quality colostrum. Because, I mean, in terms of mammary glands, the bigger the better, especially when it comes to lactation, right? That's what I assumed, and that's what many of us thought for a long time. In fact, that's what the Neocare study showed us. They showed that variation from one mammary gland to the other in terms of immunoglobulin concentration varies widely. 42, more or less 32.1%. What does this tell you in practice? It means that in real life, you currently have no way to predict which mammary gland, which pair of mammary glands will give the best quality colostrum. You simply have no way. So the main problem we have here so far is that in canines, there is no qualitative way to assess the colostrum quality in bitches in routine. I mean, refractometers, we use them in other species like in mares, but they simply don't work in bitches. So in canines so far, we are therefore not able to predict what the real quality of the colostrum of the bitch is. And Neocare showed something interesting. In fact, in those newborn puppies, they were able to define a threshold. If this puppy if the blood immunoglobulin concentration in those puppies was above this threshold, which for the record is 230 milligrams per deciliter, if those puppies were above this threshold, they had more immunoglobulins than that, their neonatal mortality rate was 4.9%, which is really low because in average in canines, it's 20%. However, when those puppies were below this threshold, when they had less immunoglobulins than the threshold, that's their neonatal mortality rate, 44.4%. Huge difference, right? And what they also found, which is extremely interesting in my opinion, 18.1% of those newborn puppies, even if you put them on the mammary glands right after they're born, they did not get the colostrum. They didn't get the colostrum because probably they were on a mammary gland that wasn't producing the colostrum with a good enough quality. So you see the challenge here. We have those, but we keep saying that colostrum intake is super important in newborn puppies. Now we can see if they get the colostrum, their neonatal mortality rate is very low. If they don't get it, well, neonatal mortality rate is close to 50%. And what we know now is that close to 20% of those newborn puppies, even if they are put on the mammary glands right after birth, they don't get the colostrum because of this variation from one mammary gland to the other. So what now? You guys must be thinking, okay, great, so what could we do? The Neocare studies, again, found a very simple way to assess colostrum intake in puppies, weight gain. They found out that there was a high correlation between early weight gain and colostrum intake, and that early weight gain was a simple and easy way to evaluate if the puppy drank the colostrum or not. So it comes back to what we were saying before. Having a scale in newborn puppies is still of the utmost importance. And when you observe this weight gain, well, you have a good indication that they were able to get the colostrum, and you have a good indication that they are healthy, and it's a good indication of their health. So what they did, the great thing is that they didn't stop here. They said they really wanted to come up with solutions to help those at-risk puppies. So their first hypothesis was that energy intake after birth may be one of the factors limiting puppy survival, and that failure of colostral transfer and therefore negative early growth could contribute to that. So what they did is that they evaluated the impact of an early supplementation of puppies with a milk replacer enriched with a glucose polymer called maltodextrin. So maltodextrin, just so you know, is used in formulas for premature human babies because it is absorbed faster at the digestive tract level. And when we consider the weight and the stage of development of puppies at birth, well, I mean, they are blind, they are deaf, they are very small. They share many similarities with human preemies. Supplemented puppies, in fact, in their study, receive this enriched milk replacer, again containing maltodextrin, every 6 hours, from 12 hours to 48 hours after birth. And their conclusions were the following. The supplemented group had a significantly higher growth, again, correlated with health, at 48 hours. Remember that they came up with several different ways to identify puppies at risk for neonatal mortality. So what they noticed is that when they were supplementing with maltodextrin, they were in fact decreasing the number of puppies that were at risk for neonatal mortality. They were optimizing their chances of survival. And as we mentioned earlier, colostrum brings for sure energy, but it also brings immunity. As their previous studies demonstrated also, puppies that did not have an adequate level of immunoglobulins after drinking the colostrum were also more at risk for neonatal mortality. So they tried to use hyperimmune plasma, which is, again, that they collected on routinely vaccinated dogs. So they used it, they had used it in a previous study, but here they used it a little bit differently. So what they did here is that, in fact, they supplemented those puppies, those newborn puppies, at birth, and then every 2 days until 56 days with hyperimmune plasma, 1.5 milliliter of plasma for 100 grams of puppy, and they did this again from birth every 2 days until 56 days after those puppies were born. And what they found is that by doing that, they again found a significant association between weight gain and supplementation. And moreover, especially in large breed puppies, supplemented large breed puppies gain more weight than the control group. So what they showed is that the digestive microbiome in those supplemented large breed puppies was also very different. Clostridium, which is, as you know, usually the poster picture of the bad bacteria, was less represented in supplemented puppies, whereas lactobacillus, which are seen as the healthy ones, were more present in the microbiome. So this is of particular interest in large breed puppies since they have been demonstrated to be more susceptible to diarrhea during the pre-weaning period, which is obviously associated also with lesser weight gain. So their hypothesis here was therefore that hyperimmune supplementation affects the digestive and global health of those puppies. But remember what I said, they were giving 1.5 milliliter of serum for 100 grams of puppy from birth to 56 days after those puppies were born, every 2 days. From a practical standpoint, that's not super simple because it represents huge quantities, huge volumes of blood to draw from adult dogs. So hyperimmune plasma supplementation could be beneficial, but from a practical standpoint was pretty complicated. So they tried a similar experiment, and this time, however, they used something we call hyperimmune egg yolk. So hyperimmune egg yolk is something you might not all be familiar with. So let me explain. The concept of hyperimmune egg supplementation is hyperimmune egg yolk supplementation is in fact really not something new in biology, and in fact it is based on the use of something we call IgY. So those IgYs are those immunoglobulins produced by chicken, and in fact, they accumulate in the egg yolk. The concept is super simple. To make it super short, you take a chicken, you vaccinate the chicken against diseases that could potentially harm the newborn. Those chickens will produce antibodies against those disorders, specific antibodies against those diseases. And those antibodies, those IgYs, will accumulate in the egg yolk. You recover the egg yolk, you turn it into an hyperimmune egg yolk powder, as you can see here. And again, you have an hyperimmune preparation targeting your pathogens of interest that newborns can benefit from. You see, this concept has been proposed as an alternative in farm animals, and egg powder administration has been shown to significantly reduce the risk of GI infections in mice, poultry, piglets, and calves. So Neocare obtained a hyperimmune egg yolk powder containing specific antibodies against canine parvo, #1 infectious cause of pediatric mortality in puppies, and E. coli, #1 infectious cause of neonatal mortality in puppies. So they have this hyperimmune egg yolk powder. They added it to a canine milk replacer and tried its efficacy. And their findings, in fact, were very similar to what they observed with the hyperimmune solution. Again, in large breed puppies especially, supplemented puppies gain more weight during the entire neonatal period. As we discussed before, again, better growth is a reflection of a better health. And last year, in 2017, they showed us this graph that I really wanted to show you guys because, in fact, it really is a follow-up of the studies I showed you before. They showed that, in fact, neonatal mortality when puppies are deficient in immunity, when they didn't receive enough immunity from the colostrum their mother, is usually 10.5%. When those puppies, right after birth, didn't receive enough immunity but not enough energy, the neonatal mortality rate is 23.7. So here already we can see that based on those results, seems like energy deficiency might be more problematic than immunity deficiency. When we think of it, because of the placentation in canines, well, they still get 10% of the immunity, their immunity at birth comes from transplacental transfer, from transfer of these immunoglobulins through the placenta. So most of it comes from the colostrum, but they can still get some from the placenta. And energy seems more important. But when you combine deficit in energy and immunity, which here again in this follow-up study was close to 20% of the puppies, 41% neonatal mortality rate. And when those puppies have both, when they receive both energy and immunity right after birth, 3.5% neonatal mortality rate, which is way lower. Remember, in average in canines, the neonatal mortality rate, and this is something that has been shown in all studies all across the world, is around 20%. So after their studies, Neocare came up with this statement. The perfect hyperimmune solution should provide the newborns not only with specific perceived immunity, but also with nutrients and energy. This is the statement that we had from the Neocare studies. And their studies gave birth to this. And this is Protect, the new generation of milk replacers. It contains the maltodextrin we touched on. And thanks to the IgY technology, it also contains those immunoglobulins against parvo and E. coli that were used in the Neocare studies. After what I just told you about the studies behind this product, you can understand how excited I was when I found out about it in 2016. You see, in the past, in canine neonatology, when we had a puppy that wasn't doing well, our first challenge was sometimes it was very difficult to identify before it was too late. And then when they were not doing well, very often we were giving them antibiotics and crossing fingers because we didn't know better. Today, with the Neocare studies, we have a better understanding of what is impacting the neonatal survival, the neonatal health. As I said, this product was launched in Europe in September 2016. I was really looking forward to it. And it is now available in Canada, which makes me super happy because we finally have access to those milk replacers 3.0 that are really changing the game, in my opinion. You see, based on what I learned in 2016, I had to change several parts of the talks I used to give on canine repro and neonatology. But that's the beauty of it somehow. I mean, in biology, as you know, we keep learning as we go. 2016 brought a lot of great stuff for people like us who are interested in this field. And I can tell you one thing. Now we have new tools. Now we have new approaches. Now we have new alternatives. I can't wait to see what's next. Next week, I'll be in Venice in Europe. There's the 2018 Apgar Congress, which is, again, the Congress where all repro specialists gather in Europe. And NeoCare will be there, and I'm sure they're going to present some very interesting updates on canine neonatology because they are continuing this work. They're still working on this topic. And I really can't wait to see what they're going to present at this conference. Because in my opinion, as long as we have groups, research groups like that working on this topic, the future of this discipline definitely looks bright, I think. And that's what I wanted to tell you guys today. So thank you so much, guys. Hey, it's 2:06 p.m. in Waterloo, Ontario, which means that here it's noon. So I'm early on time. So that's what I wanted to tell you again on neonatology. I hope you guys learned a few things. What I'm going to do now is that I'm going to stop the recording and we will open it to a Q&A. So if you have questions, feel free to post them on the chat. My colleagues are going to flag them and I'm going to answer them. But one thing, I really want to thank you guys for attending to this presentation. Always a pleasure to interact with you guys online. Thanks for your online engagement. Thanks for all answering the questions. Thanks for listening to nearly 1 hour of Franglish with me. It was a pleasure. And don't hesitate if you have questions. As we always say, the presentation ends here, but the discussion continues. If tomorrow, in the few days after, you think of all the questions, feel free to reach out to us. We'll be more than happy to provide you answers if we have them. And if we don't have them, we'll let you know we don't have them. But that's how we keep improving. The more questions we get from you guys, the more we think about it, and the more we can come up with answers. Thank you again, and I'll see you in 10 seconds on the chat to answer your question. Bye-bye, guys.